Upgrade to the Sarge or Officer tier membership to hear the rest of this podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Armchair Chats podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing a very special guest and someone I'd consider a best friend. Joining us is Aaron Legault, the lead developer behind Fire and Maneuver, a game we both worked on for the last 2.5 years. Aaron also runs his own indie game studio titled Targon Studios, his latest game being Miss Squeaker's Home for the Sick. Now, Aaron is working with us again on a game called Master of Command 7 Years War, and with his own project titled Darkwater. We'll dive into these games a little later, but for now, I encourage you to wishlist them both on Steam. Aaron, it's great to have you here. How have you been?
I've been good. Thanks for having me, Griffin.
Yeah, it's nice to have you back on. Well, this is technically your first time on. We tried doing a recording before, and we had all these software issues, so we did that in November of last year, so it took us like 8 months to finally go back and try again.
Did it take that long?
But,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was last year that we tried recording and it didn't work, and then, yeah. I've been pretty inconsistent with the podcast, but now I feel like I'm going to get rhythm back going again, so. All right, my first question for you, by the way, is what are we doing for your character? Who am I talking to right now? What do you think we should draw for you?
I think I got to stay true to the company and go with a rat, but maybe incorporate like a diving suit into that. I picture it.
Would you go a rat or a mouse?
Or probably a mouse. I prefer them.
A mouse? Like, a little smaller?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I picture him in a little diving suit too, with his like snout poking out of a. You know the thing, that door that swings open. Yeah, like that.
Little. It's like a grate almost. Yeah. What is the backstory behind the rat? Why, for those listening, why would you pick that animal?
Originally, it was for Miss Squeaker's Home for the Sick, which is a game that, it's like a game that takes place during a civil war, and you're just like a hospital administrator, just stamping documents of patients that are coming into the hospital. And I thought, if that setting was with humans, and you're just getting like these super messed up and super like bloodied humans,
it's a little gory.
It's too gory, it's too offensive, it's too much. So I tried to like almost sanitize the universe a bit, make it a bit more approachable and just funny not funny, but like approachable using mice.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you're mentioning Miss Squeaker's Home for the Sick. When was that game released?
2018.
What year was 2018? And then you made one game before that, and what year was that? Do you remember?
The Haunting of Billy. That was back in 2016.
2016. So when did you... That's almost 10 years, or going to be pretty soon, which is a little crazy. Yeah. What age did you start getting interested in game design? Like, where did things kind of begin, and then leading up to Haunting of Billy?
I believe I first started using Unity in 2012, so roughly when I was 12. But even then I was still dabbling in like other game development things. Before that, I was like, funnily enough, before any of this, I was animating, like little things in Movie Maker. So it's funny that I started with animation, then moved to game development, and then moved to animation for you. But I'm sure we'll talk about that later. I forget the things. It's like RPG Maker, things like that. Just, I think when I was 10 or 11, and then I got into Unity, which I still use now, when I was around 12.
Mm-hmm. And then where did that lead toward decide, or like you were 16 when you published your first game, is that right? So how the hell did you end up doing that so young? Like going from 12 years old to starting with Unity, and then ending up putting something on Steam. And if I remember correctly, I don't know if it was the case that long ago, but Steam did not let you just put random stuff up on their platform like you can today. They had like the Greenlight platform or system, and then before that, it was all curated. They had to handpick the games that would be featured there.
What was the first part of that question? How did I do that?
Yeah, so like how did you get that in such short amount of time, and what like got you to work on your first project like that?
I mean, 4 years to work on it. I just spent 4 years, like all day, every day when I was out of school, in the morning, just like doing game development and just like having fun, just messing around. Not even, money wasn't even a concern for me because I was so young and just living at home. So I just kind of mess around and have fun. And then I just worked on that and just a lot of free time and just.
How did you, because I've worked on when I was a kid, I used things like Pivot to play with animations, or I would go and do like frame by frame
Yeah.
animations and stuff. I've done there's another game development tool. I forget the name of just Game Maker or something. I remember playing with stuff like that, but I just made a bunch of crap. I never like turned it into an actual project. So how did you go from starting on Unity to like choosing what project you would do and just like actually committing to it and finishing it?
I think I would just watch a lot of YouTube videos, just a lot of tutorials online, and
Mhm.
after like 4 years of just having fun, just messing around, I've honestly made probably like 100 tiny projects of just the most random things.
Gotcha.
And then
Okay.
it's just kind of like you watch these videos and they tell you got to commit to something. You just got to make something
Mhm.
because it's easy working on a lot of little things and just messing around, but
Mhm.
actually fully finishing a game is, gosh, it's difficult to do. So I guess I just committed to that. There's
Speaking of that, I'm actually going to jump ahead to a question that I had for you because I think it's related to something you just said now.
Yep.
So you've been super prolific with projects. We've just talked about Haunting of Billy is a game you worked on, Squeaker's Home for the Sick. You worked with us on Fire Maneuver. Now Darkwater, alongside our next game, Master of Commands. That's a ton of projects, and you're still pretty young, right? So most people who would have 3 or 4 games under their belt, and I mean these are indie games, they're smaller, so that makes
Yep.
sense. But oftentimes I'll check studios, and they have like 1 or 2 games released. So it's rare to see somebody on their like 5th game or something like that. What is your like advice then for people in game development or who want to get into game creation on how to be consistent and reach the finish line?
The biggest thing for me is I just like the money was never the end goal for me. I just so passionately loved doing it that you see these statistics about how 90% of indie developers will quit after the first game. And
Mhm.
the assumption is they expected to make it big and got disappointed, or they ran out of money, or whatever it may be. Um, and it's just, I never had that expectation, which I think is so important that, like, I released my first game, it made a bit of money, but nothing
Mhm.
insane. And I never looked at that like, oh my gosh, that's a complete failure. I'm done. I'm not going to keep doing this. I just did it for the,
Yeah, a lot of people they try making their dream game on their first
yeah, oh
project,
yeah,
and then they want everyone else to share their passion for their dream. But also the biggest issue is on your first game, you're going to make the most amount of mistakes. So you're
exactly.
presenting what you are the most passionate about at the roughest possible state, and now you're going to be the most crushed when people don't share your excitement
Yeah.
for it.
Like your
Yeah.
first game is going to be your worst game. It's just like
Yeah,
of course it
yeah,
will.
that's
Your
true.
first painting will.
Yeah.
Any kind of like creative art form, it'll be the first thing you do will be your worst. So yeah, don't do your dream game for the first one, and then you'll spend like
Yep.
a decade doing it and release it, and it just won't be that good. You just got to keep working on little projects, and I don't. You have to just push through. Or sorry, you have to push through. You just have to keep going. Just so many people expect.
How do you come up with a game that is going to simultaneously fill like the scope requirement to be small and something that you can complete on your own, but also not so small that if I go make Pong, who's going to go play the next Pong, right? So it's got to be exciting enough to be new, and with the amount of indie games coming out every year, stand out. How do you simultaneously balance being able to finish a project reasonably, but also make it popular enough that you're going to stand out from the rest?
Truthfully, I think it's just, I guess it's like a muscle you have to work out. It's just a skill you have to get. There's plenty of projects that I made when I was younger that were way too ambitious, way too big, and it's just something
Yeah.
you have to learn. It's like even the old game you asked me about, New Void, like that space game. It was just too big. It's just I tried working on it. It was just there wasn't a clear goal for it. It was way too ambitious, way too big, and I learned from that. And then honestly, we'll talk about this later with Darkwater. Like that's almost like a next step from New Void. I've always wanted to make a game like that,
Ah, that's
and a lot of the systems I actually copied over from New Void. I moved, and it's just you learn. It's like, okay, I tried that, it didn't work, and now moving forward, I'm in a better place to make these games that I'm working on now. So it's just practice. Honestly, it's and just like broadly, just you got to start small. You just got to what is core to the game that I want to make? What is the core gameplay loop? What will generate the most fun? Just complete that, get it into a playable state, and then discuss or reason adding in more features.
What is the balance that you find between design and execution on that note? So, like, how much pre-planning do you think you need to do for a game versus jumping in, feeling out what's fun, and just following that source of fun?
I probably do it right in the middle. Let me think. With Darkwater, oh gosh, I got like the core gameplay of that done in a week because for over the Christmas break, I was playing Faster Than Light and like the game like clicked about how it would work.
Mm-hmm.
And I just jumped right into working on it and just planning all at the same time and I think you don't want to get too stuck in theory because a lot of that will fall apart the second you start designing it or actually playing it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fine balance between just like theorizing the most basic elements, implementing them, seeing how they feel, and then going from there. Especially like if you spend a week putting together a massive document and then the second you start implementing it, you realize, oh wow, this other feature would actually be a lot more fun. And then like you're almost, what's that called? Some cost fallacy, where now you have to throw everything out. Do I decide to keep working on this project that won't be as fun?
Just because you put in all that time designing it, now you have to follow the document that you built. It's almost like a scientific thing where you're making like predictions and then you need to run experiments, test them, check your findings, and then adjust your data and then change your planning accordingly and come up with like the solutions for it. You and I, you were speaking about you basically just need practice. I think it's difficult when to practice on these kind of things with like giant game projects, which will take up multiple years of your life. So something that you and I did that I thought was fun is you and I had done a game jam, a board game jam recently, because I can't code, and when you make a board game, you can just say what the rules are, so it's kind of an easier way of doing like a video game jam where a bug could break the entire thing. And I had learned that lesson the hard way. I still like my result, but I realized I worked way too hard for it, where I was bleeding over the end product day. I found, honestly, the only way for me to know that would be having to practice and just know, okay, this, like in your mind, you could think, I'll just make a card game. That sounds, I can do that. I'd need to write 100 cards. And then if you realize this is the over-planning phase, when you plan, okay, I need 100 cards, 100 of these, and 100 of that. When you start doing it and you realize it takes too long, there's no way you can pivot. You already just laid down unless you build the game from the ground up to be flexible. But if you pre-plan everything, now you've committed yourself into this massive project that you shouldn't have done.
Yep, exactly.
So for me, that's some personal advice for me. I think it's cool if you could do prototyping, either on Unity or like a software of your choice, or also like prototype it with pieces of paper as a board game and see if you can run it that way. Even like the very basics, or just see. I think even with one of the games we were working on, we've been doing another project. Maybe it was Imperial Dawn or Free Company or something like that. Neither of those projects are being worked on right now. But I would run tests to build like RPG systems and see if they were fun or too complex. And I would often like get carried away with wanting to like bring in ingredients from all these different RPG systems and then not test them. And then I would say, okay, I'm done.
Yep.
And then we'd realize it was too many. So what I started doing is just taking all the RPG systems and then running myself through what would character creation be like, or like looking at the pieces of paper, not even pitching it to so my role would be the game designer in the studio in Armchair History Interactive. Just for context for people, Aaron works as a developer, and so that's the two kind of roles that we take on the studio. And then he has his own studio where he can work on solo games. So that's just some context for people. But yeah, I found something that helped for me was running through tests and just seeing how it would play through hypothetically before even pitching it, and then I could just catch all the mistakes early on. I think that sort of thing helps out a lot.
You mentioned, like, to learn these things, you have to go through a multi-year, expensive game. But then also you mentioned, like, there's nothing stopping you from working on board games, from working on card games, just little things. And even those help to learn. So for anybody...
Yeah, in the worst case, you gain experience from these. I mean, there's a lot of people... This is going to sound, like, kind of condescending, but there's people I talk to who don't do game design, and they will get excited about a game that I'm working on, or I'll talk about game ideas and stuff, and it feels like there's a disconnect in what they say. Like, I'm not calling anybody out specifically, but for our Master of Command is a game that we're working on, and one of, like, the selling points is, like, the customization that you can do with your regiment. So each unit, you can, like, change their inventory slots and, like, adjust their flag and that sort of thing. I was looking for historical items to include as upgrades that you could find. So maybe a larger knapsack allows your regiment to carry more items, like a bag of grenades, for example. But I've spoken to some people who are really into history and maybe like game design, but don't practice designs or know a lot of game design systems. And they'll say things like, okay, for your shoes, you need a dedicated shoe system where shoes will wear out, and then you have to replace them, and then go find new shoes and outfit them with this and blah, blah, blah. And then you can build a band, and if you include a band for the regiment, you have to pick all the instruments for the band and blah, blah, blah. They just sort of think like the more details you can include, that's what makes a system fun. But you don't, if you've never practiced that before, you don't realize that you're just making this an over cumbersome, or it just doesn't fit the idea of the game. If the whole thing is like this zoomed out, you're a general leading an army, why am I choosing the laces on a on a soldier's foot? So
I never minded that too much, to be honest. That's our job as designers. It's the exact same as if I walked into a building that was being constructed and said, oh man, imagine if you put a chandelier there, and then the engineer's like, there's no beam there. You can't do it. It's not possible. They get excited, you'll suggest ideas, and it's your job as the developer to
you parse through and find what's feasible. Yeah. I think in that context, it's completely fine. My point I'm trying to make, though, is like, in having those conversations with people, you realize how much that you've kind of grown through game design. Because the only reason I would go, well, that idea doesn't make sense, is only because I failed or practiced or whatever. And had I not had any experiences, maybe I would have said, yeah, that sounds like that's just realistic. That's just cool. And you just kind of come up with things off the top of your head. But I think it's only through practicing, especially smaller iterations. You had mentioned before you released your first project, you may have done like 100 little small things first. Every little failure that you do, whether it's a public failure that you release or a private one in your own project in the dumpster, all of those failures amount to experience that you're getting. As long as you can, when you finish a project or you decide to stop working on it, if you can say why you did that, I think that is just as big of an accomplishment as finishing the game in some cases. If you can justify why you had to stop something, okay, I didn't know this part of the code, or this part of the game design was flawed from the start, blah, blah, blah. If you, not in a way that you're making excuses, but in a way that you're listing all the reasons why that system doesn't work, that is just as valuable, because those are all the lessons you just learned. And now hopefully when you make the next one, now you're not going to... And if you do that 100 times and you come away with 4 or 5 lessons per project failure, you're going to have like 500 plus lessons. And now having that toolbox going into the next game, you're going to be... To me, that's essential. If you don't have that toolbox of failures, there's no way. That would be like for my YouTube channel, if I had to make my next YouTube video and we had not made 200 of them previously. It's my first time making a video. Anybody who's a YouTuber or who's made videos before, anytime you put your first one out, it's not good, obviously. Yeah. It's very rare for someone to do. It's possible, but it's rare.
And I think a lot of people have the expectation that, they want their first game to be perfect. They want it to be incredible and but it's a hard thing to achieve, and you shouldn't have that expectation. You just need to, it's your first one. You'll keep learning.
Yeah, and as Aaron said too, most, like 90% of indie devs who make their first game just quit. If you can, again, just walk away with your release or the game that you dropped, understanding why it didn't work, and you can just get back in there and try again and incorporate lessons you've learned, I think that's the most valuable thing. But if you just become defeatist about it and just say, I don't know why it failed, nobody liked it, they should have liked it, it's all their fault, and then you're screwed. There's no way. Okay, jumping back onto the questions, because we've kind of sidetracked a lot. Did you get any formal education for game development? So you released your first game in high school. Did you ever go to college? And if you did, what did you end up studying or doing there?
I went to university for 1.5 years for game development, computer science, and I didn't like it at all. It just, it was so math heavy, and just like these complicated equations and like the optimal way to store data, to do like arrays, all the different types of like ways to iterate through data. And it just seemed it almost seemed like they were teaching me to be a NASA scientist for just the amount of level of math. And by the time I was in university, I'd already developed games. I was released them, working on them, and it was just so unnecessary. It felt like, it seemed.
Do you think there are enough tools that for game design I know a lot of creative careers often don't need education. It's like we joke about if you had to go to comedy school to be a comedian, then you probably shouldn't be a comedian. Maybe that's not quite to the extent of like learning how to code, which is an important skill that you could learn in a class. But that being said, how much of this do you think has been like democratized? Like how much of this knowledge can you find on your own without needing to go to an institution?
I think you can find all the knowledge on your own, honestly, with YouTube and just all the tutorials online. And the market seems to reflect that too, because from what I've seen from game development studios, they don't really care about degrees. They just want to see what you've worked on. I actually talked with a game development company that said, the owner of it directly said, I don't care what degree you have. I want to see that you've made a game. It's like, if somebody comes up to me with a degree, I'm going to ask them, okay, have you released any games? They would rather take somebody without a degree, but has developed a game than just somebody who's been in school for 4 years and hasn't had the passion for game development to actually do it on their own, to pursue it in their own free time. That's just from my personal experience. Other people obviously may have seen it differently, but
in like if you're going into like the AAA industry, maybe you need both, right? They want to see a good degree and projects you've done. And those guys, I think getting the degree is just going to be an advantage.
Yes.
But it's not the essential necessarily. I feel like there are people, when I hired for Armchair History Interactive, I was only looking at portfolios, things that I didn't even look at the college section. I just want to see what people worked on. And then when I hire artists, like most creative skills, the first question I ask is a portfolio. I don't ask for resumes. I don't care at all where they've worked or whatever. I mean, it's good to know maybe if they quit their job every month, that would be good to know because that's not a good thing. But in terms of actual credentials, if they can draw amazing art, I care about that the most. And games are a form of art, like any kind of creative space. I feel like you just have to show your skills, and that's going to attract either people to play your game or attract a job for you to work in that kind of industry.
That's the thing. With creative work, it's like you can see exactly what you're going to get. What does a degree matter when you're looking at this like beautiful picture that they've drawn?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're hiring a doctor, it's like you can't look at past clients. You have to just you want them to know what they're doing through like an institution. Yep. So it makes sense.
I sent you that video where a guy was driving in a van giving lobotomies to people.
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember that? He was like door-to-door lobotomies. Did he have any credentials? I don't remember.
I would hope so. I don't remember specifically hearing that, but I would hope so.
I think he like developed it
on his own, in his basement.
On his own. Murdering people, and then they give him a. Didn't he get some kind of big award for it, or he got like a. What was it?
I don't remember. It was just.
It's one of those.
Some like scientific reward, or I forget. Just like for the advancement of scooping out brains or something.
Yeah.
Messed up.
I always found it funny that video. People are coming back to get their second.
Oh my gosh! The brain's trying to heal itself.
They're like, doctor, part of my brain rehealed it, built it back itself. Can you scoop that part out again?
It's like your arm is trying to heal a wound, and he just opens it back up.
Oh god,
that's horrible.
Okay, that is rough. And then they're giving him awards. He's like a North Korean general with all the medals strapped to his chest.
Jingling as he's like doing the operation.
Okay, my next question for you. Let me see. I have fan questions. I think I'm going to get to them at the end.
Okay.
To pivot a bit, we've been talking a lot about game design. I know you like history as well. Maybe actually before that, though, let's talk about how you got even involved with the Armchair Historian. Let's talk a bit about that. At what point did you join the Armchair Historian, and for what role did you join as?
I originally joined the Armchair Historian in late 2019, I think November, like right before COVID. I joined as an animator, which is funny because I never did any animation work. I saw your YouTube posting about animators on like the community tab, and I remember looking at that thinking like, I was just instantly intrigued and wanted to do it, but I thought like, I've never animated before. I can't do this. So I didn't send the email. I went to bed that night. I like tossed and turned thinking like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? You know, like he says no. So I got out of bed at like 1 a.m. and responded to the email. And the next morning you deleted that community post. So had I not gotten out of bed that night, I never would have worked here.
Yeah, I think we got too many submissions, so I had to turn it off. I think a better way to do that, the thing about deleting it is, like you said, if you were somebody who was about to send an application, or if somebody just needed to check the date for when they needed to submit by, Yeah, that's not good to just delete it. So I think in retrospect that was not good, but that's crazy how close that would have been. When I could have just edited the message and said, "Hey, we're not looking for people anymore. This is your due date." But we got anytime I post those, I get so many applications to look for.
I think it's funny. That's the
and then-
lore. It's like as the gate's closing, I slid right in.
Yeah. And then what did you? So you joined for animation. Yep. What were the first things that you worked on?
Gosh, first ones. You had me. The first ever things I did for the channel were advertisements. I think I did that for the marathon video.
Oh, you hated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was not. It's not fun. It really is
not
not
working
fun to do those.
on Raid advertisements. Not a good time.
And they give you 10 rounds of revisions about how like the phone should be placed.
Oh my
the lab.
gosh! Yep. And the way the gem bag opens.
Yeah, gem bag.
I think the first one
to go back and re-record it. And...
I think the first video I worked on for proper animation was Dunkirk, the like German Dunkirk video.
Yeah, if anybody remembers the old perspective videos we did, we always included like conversations. I always tried to do like a creative segment where you'd see like the generals speaking their own language about their own situation with real historical figures. We stopped doing that. Just I don't know. I think YouTube is not the creative space. I feel like that's a whole separate subject, but it just doesn't reward creativity. If I make something more lazily, let's say, and I just like mass produce it, you get better results on YouTube, which only cares about numbers and watch time and just churning stuff out than making really creative. There's exceptions to that, but it is just, after 8 years of being on it, I don't feel as rewarded in that case. So it's a shame you couldn't keep doing that. Like we kind of cut that. But yeah, you were doing the mouth animations, right?
That's a funny segue if you want to get into it, to automate.
Yeah.
I worked on the like mouth animations, the like speeches, and it was very labor intensive because I was doing those by hand. I was actually listening to what's that called? I forget. There's a certain term for the shortest like length of human sound in speech, like the, k. I forget there's a term for that. So I'd have to listen to those and then like place in the actual mouth formations by hand. And so I started looking into ways to do that easier, and I ended up developing software that would automate the whole process. So it takes those audio clips with a transcript, breaks it down into those short phrases of like the short sounds, and then aligns those with certain mouth shapes. And that ended up turning into Automate, which is the animation software that actually animates this podcast, which is funny.
Oh yeah, that's
so
true.
It all leads into
our mouths,
like from the early days of working on that to getting annoyed and like trying to come up with a solution directly led into the animation for this podcast.
Yeah, and hopefully we could use it for more. Like I don't think this is what I can do, but I hate going on camera. It'd be lovely to just have my cartoon character here talking. People would hate that though. I know people even for the podcast think it should be on video, but I feel like it's kind of lame to just have a blurry Zoom call on each side rather than this nice little office with our drawn characters.
Unique.
There's some charm to it. Yeah. Okay, real quick, and you guys tell me in the comments. I've insisted on Aaron. He spells it AUDIMATE. So Audi, like the car.
No.
Audi, or howdy there, howdy. And then mate. And I was thinking, it kind of sounds like kind of that cowboyish outback theme, and mate kind of sounds British or Australian. I'm thinking, okay, that kind of sounds perfect. If you had a kangaroo mascot and it goes, howdy mate, howdy. I feel like that is a better marketing spin than currently Aaron's mascot for Audi Mate is a robot that goes Audi Mate, automate audio.
No, it's a sweet little robot.
No, it goes I will automate. I am boring. No.
Just to clarify,
I feel like the little kangaroo.
Like for extra context, the current name is based off like audio and automate. So like audio automate, but
it's also like a greeting icon. Howdy, man.
Yeah. I don't know how that's relevant.
If you had the kangaroo, and the little Joey inside the pouch, also you'd have double automate going on, two mouths going.
He's the one
and
that
a little
seals
baby's
the deal.
trying to talk.
He pops out and like brings the contract.
He gives you a discount. No, it's like
Okay, the
main
friendly
kangaroo
one.
says like, here's what it does. Then it zooms down to the pouch and it gives you the promo code.
Hey, mate, I'll
That
give
to
you a
me seems like
promo.
a
Link
he
below.
like pulls you aside like the black
The
market.
camera zooms in on him.
Come into he brings you
It's
into the
stupid,
pouch.
the
and it's
office,
a whole like
the
drug.
fleshy, wet office.
Why'd you say
I
that?
don't know what the
Oh,
inside
man.
of the pouch is like.
It's like an Indian call center
Oh, Griffin.
down there. No, they're not. Audimate isn't trying to scam you.
No.
We will send you emails though, begging. No, I'm kidding.
Please.
But no, if you do have, if you are interested in using Audimate, we leave a comment and we might follow up. You can use we haven't found a lot of people, right? Or I've tried to talk to some YouTubers about it, but it's really difficult because I think people associate, the mascots and everything with, what do you call them? Like a VTuber or something, or something like that. But I don't know. I feel like it's a really good software and it's super easy to use. I feel like it's tough to find like where that would fit for YouTubers or like what purpose they would use it for. But we've talked about it before. Maybe like trying to find history YouTubers who mostly go on camera. It's not great for that. But people who do have already animated characters, it might be really useful.
That's the biggest thing.
So if you are one of those people listening,
Just like targeting people who already have animated characters, I think is the best. Or just even outside of YouTube, like education and like what's it called? Like companies that give like Amazon doing those like videos on corporate videos,
or like video explainers and stuff,
things like that.
Just something easy to make. But it's really you can like customize a lot of it. And do you like rig up different characters, or like how does it know? And can you use different art styles for the mouths, or does it use like a one system?
Oh no, you can use any amount of art styles for the mouth. Yeah, it's very customizable. Any character, any mouth, anything. Like even for this video, we'll have a snout that's talking.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not just like human mouths in one configuration, and everything else will break. It's like anything will work.
That's cool. Okay, we got into how you joined the Armchair Historian. To go back to the question I wanted to ask before that one is, which types of history, or maybe a certain period or location, what kind of history do you like and why? And do you have a favorite historical moment?
Okay, interesting. I'll answer the first part. All of my favorite history that I like to learn about falls within North America. Probably my first favorite would be like Inuit and Arctic history. I just find that so fascinating, just insane how people could live up there. And yeah, I just love reading about it, researching it, and yeah, it's just so cool. And then after that, probably French-Canadian history, Quebec, like the early colonization I find interesting. And just, honestly, just North America, Arctic, indigenous pre-contact, and like French colonization and settlement of North America. Those are the big three, I'd say.
Do you have are there any stories or even things pertaining? I know you and I had talked a while ago, or you would watch stuff on like Arctic exploration or those kind of stories, or early like explorers, or what are the French Courrier de Bois or something? Yeah. It's kind of a broad question, so I don't. If you threw that question at me, I don't know how I'd answer it. But are there any that come to mind that you find interesting?
Franklin expedition, I find very cool, but not even from the perspective of the ship. Like from the perspective of the Inuit, I find so fascinating about how like the Franklin expedition.
You want to tell tell the story, and if people don't know,
essentially it was a expedition to find the Northwest Passage. I think in the 1840s to 1850s. And like the Northwest Passage, pretty much, they speculated that there was a route in the Arctic Ocean between like Europe and Asia that would have cut down like sailing time significantly. Otherwise, you have to go all the way around South America, and there was no Panama Canal at the time. So there's this bunch of expeditions trying to look for this passage. And with this Franklin expedition, they got trapped in ice and essentially had to abandon the ships and just start leaving and like wandering the ice, looking for help or just going down south for civilization. But it's just so fascinating. Like years later, like a couple of years later, they sent an expedition to go look for it. They talked to the Inuit, and they kept doing this for a few years and gathering all these testimonies. And it's so odd hearing from their perspective of, you've got these Inuits living in these groups just, doing their thing. They've hardly ever even seen Europeans, and they see these like bands of dying like Europeans, like just wandering the ice, not speaking their language. They would even describe them as like demons and just like zombies almost. They just came out of nowhere with all this like unusual technology and like metal, and even tried to help them at times, but they were like non-responsive and just language barrier. Like that story I just find like it's very interesting to research.
What ultimately happened to the men?
They all perished. They all died. There's speculation that some of them might have integrated into with the Inuit, but that doesn't seem to be true. But they just kept trying to go down further and further south, and they all just ultimately died. Yeah.
Was there any? I mean, that region of Canada is so barren. How long do you think you'd have to go to find any kind of like warmth or animals to live off of or anything? Like they were so far north that I mean, you would have to go an insane distance to find anything.
I think your only hope would be going down the Hudson's Bay and finding like a trading outpost, like a Hudson's Bay company trading outpost. Besides that,
yeah, they're established pretty far north.
Oh yeah, they were. I don't know how frequently they were, especially during the winter, if they were actually manned, or if just in the summers they'd go and man them. But in the Hudson, like, if you actually go down to the Hudson's Bay, it starts to get forested again. But that's a long trek to go, and I don't think reasonably they could have done it. It's just...
It'd be interesting to see what... I might even, if I remember after the podcast, or maybe somebody can tell me in the comments, if you could see from the distance of where the expedition was and how far you can.
There's
get there, if it's even...
the stone cairns of, like, they would set up and, like, leave messages in, they'd leave their bones, they'd leave graves, and the further south grave was, I think it's... maybe Mackenzie Island, I don't fully remember. It's like almost mainland Canada, like the continental, like actual continent. They almost made it to, I believe.
Oh,
which,
man.
To be fair, that's still barren tundra. They weren't close. Like it's not like they were just a skip away from a city. They were.
What went wrong with the ship? How did the ship get stuck? And how did they not? You would expect. Okay, we're going into an icy area with extremely cold temperatures. How do we get through that?
It was the first expedition of its kind, so it's the same as game development. You got to learn. You just gotta go up there, and it just got
few people got to die.
It just got icebound. It got stuck in the ice, and the hull started to like crack, so they had to leave. Otherwise, once the ice thawed, it sunk.
And were they using a wooden ship at that time, or did they have any kind of
wooden.
was it like an ironclad? Did they have any steam or any metal plating or anything on the hull?
I don't believe so. No, that actually does remind me of another funny story of. The Inuit went and actually raided the ships. Like, they're completely abandoned. They see these huge fortresses sitting in the ocean, which I can't even imagine what would have, what they imagined seeing that. And they went in and, like, took wood from it, because wood is such a sparse commodity up north. So they took wood from it, they took metal, left, and then I just find that funny, too. They just, like, finding that. And
I'm surprised none of them tried to, like, live on one of the ships or nearby or something. I guess there wouldn't be too much benefit, maybe.
To a certain extent, I believe they did. They kept a few people there to man it and, just keep it in order. But either they died or the ship sunk by the time it thawed because the ice cracked the hull, kept it up because it was frozen, and then just dropped it.
Yeah, there's how many expeditions did they end up? Do you know roughly how many times that was attempted before?
Not too many, truthfully. Like a few dozen. Honestly, under probably 30.
Is there any feasible passage, even at a certain temperature of the year, that you can get?
It's too dangerous. They still don't even do it. Like to this day.
Even with modern ships?
No, it's just not. It's just not safe. It's not. But with global warming, it will be in the future. But I think it's very limited. They'll do smaller ships, but. It just never was feasible. The only real reason they do it is to like supply these northern communities, but not like to get through.
Pivoting a little bit, but still somewhat on the same subject, talking about ice, talking about water, talking about ships, seafaring. Whoa. Your next game is called Dark Water. Yeah. What was the inspiration for the game, and why is that the next game that you're working on?
I covered that a bit already. So New Void was like this space kind of exploration game that I worked on back in 2016. It was pretty much you could build your own spaceship out of like voxels, like Minecraft, like build anything. You put the thrusters on it, you put the engines, you put weapons wherever you wanted, and like you'd actually bind it to different keys on your keyboard. You got to pick. So like, you could put all the engines to W, so when you hit W, they'd thrust forwards. It was a cool system, but it was just way too ambitious, and it was too much. It was too much. I abandoned it to actually work on Midsqueaker's Home for the Sick. And I always wanted to work on a game like that. The idea would just keep coming back to me. And I tried working on it again, like in New Void 2, I guess, a few years ago. But in multiplayer where actually, I'll get into this first. I played Raft with my friends. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Raft. It's like this. You're out in the ocean and you build a raft and like you build all these rooms, you build sails, you build engines, you build all this. And that was so fun for me. And it was like so fun role playing. Like I'm the guy in the engines. We had somebody on the anchor. We had the pilot. I thought that was so cool, but it didn't leave much like room for you to explore that because like in being in charge of the engines, you literally hit E on it to start it and it was done.
Yeah.
But I just really wanted to that like kind of role play aspect of like you have a role on this ship with like your friends. Mm-hmm. Like it's kind of like communal space that you and your buddies have to divvy up tasks and work together. So I playing that, I actually went back to New Void and worked on it. But it's just a space game. You design your own ship through like voxels. It's just too like imagine building a room out of voxels, putting like a piloting room in there. It's just that's a lot to demand from the player.
Just to make it clear for people who don't know some of the game design terms, what are voxels?
Oh, sorry, like blocks, like Minecraft. It's like a building out of blocks. Mm-hmm. So you fully build out the room, like similar to Minecraft. It's just I was worried it was too much to ask for a player to like build out an entire ship, and they have to plan where each room is going to go and like what's going to go in each room, and it was too much to expect from them. And I was worried, and it was too much to work on. And then last Christmas. I was playing Faster Than Light, and I feel like the game just finally clicked in my head of like, oh my gosh, you don't have to build the entire ship out of voxels or like blocks. You can just place rooms. Like you have the whole engine room and you place it, and then you divide the roles among all the players, and like that's how you could do it. And space still seems too ambitious, so I was like, okay, what's similar to a spaceship, like a submarine? And it just kind of naturally evolved from there. Inspirations from Lethal Company, Faster Than Light, Raft, pretty much those three games just kind of like molded.
People compare it though to Phasmophobia. Is that no, not
Barotrauma?
Phasmophobia. What is it called? Barotrauma.
That's the funny thing. I never played that game. Like it was through working on this game, Darkwater. Well, let me explain the game first. So pretty much Darkwater is like you are trapped on an alien planet, and there's this like unknown virus that's spreading on this planet. So the government has frozen over the surface, and now you're trapped into the ice, and like anarchy's broken out, and you have to. That's where the game starts. And then like you get to customize your ship, similar to Faster Than Light. Actually, no, even more than that. You can like expand the width of the ship, the height. Or the length. You can build put an engine wherever you want, make all these hallways, buy all these weapons.
The height would be kind of cool because if the ship can flood, height would actually help you survive a little longer if you had like an emergency station on a ladder that you could. Would any submarines have though like mini stories that you could?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. They have lots of height. Like they're like the Typhoon classes of.
That would be kind of cool. Have you ever thought about?
Yes, it's just very complicated. Like just with the water physics. Okay. Then you'd have to have like two different. Yeah. So it'd be tough, but could be. Something to look into the future, I'd say, but not right now.
Yeah.
Gosh, where was I?
How do you know? Just to pause really quickly. Maybe this is the wrong time. Ignore this if you want to continue on. But how does a person know when to stop? Like you were talking about, that game was too ambitious. How do you know when to stop and call it quits, or that you do need to get to the finish line and don't give up on it? But when is a reasonable time to give up? Just to kind of preface a little bit of what you're talking about, because we're talking about always getting to the finish line and tackling manageable projects, but you said you stopped on that project a couple times. How do you know when that's the right time, or if you should actually power through to finish it?
I think for me, the gauge is just like I didn't have a clear focus, and I just kind of lost passion for it. It's just like, gosh, like I don't really know the path forward for this. with it, like Darkwater, it just clicked instantly, and I've never once been confused about what to work on. It was just everything like fitted perfectly.
That's
But
cool.
I'm not suggesting that's the case for people, because you're gonna hit difficult like mechanics or you're gonna hit a wall, and you should push through that. But just for this one, it's just been exceptionally easy on what to do and just the work for it. I'd say a big one. I personally don't do this. I actually like to keep my project a secret. I didn't even show it to you for a month or two. Like, is just reception. Like, if you show somebody a game you're working on after only like a month of work, like the basics, and they think, "Wow, this looks really cool," like you know you've got something, you should keep working on it. But there's no solid guideline. There's no like single sentence I can say to you about how exactly you ought to keep working on a game or stop it. It's just your judgment, and it goes back to skill. Like, you just have to keep working on these games. You just have to like hone that skill to know when to stop, to know when to keep going, and to know when like it's a good project worth continuing. I think.
Gotcha. And where did I interrupt you?
Okay, explaining the game, and then the comparison to Paratrauma, which I found funny because it wasn't until I actually showed Thomas, one of the other developers on Armchair Interactive, I showed him the game I was working on, Darkwater, and he said it looked like Paratrauma, and I checked it out. That's the first time I ever saw it, and now it's funny because everybody says it looks just like it. Or, well, like they call it the 3D Paratrauma, which is, yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, the biggest difference is that Barotrauma's side-scroller
2D
view 2D. Yeah.
Thanks for listening. To hear the full version of this chat, become a Sarge or Officer tier member over on armchairhistory.tv. Use code ArmchairChats for 60% off of your first month.